Okay. Well, thank you so much, everyone. And it's absolutely fantastic for us to be with you. And Stamatius, nice to see you again. Hey? And yeah, I listened to part of your presentation, which is absolutely fantastic. I do want to say, as teachers within the audience, a lot of our work is within teacher education and obviously teacher professional development and teacher learning. So obviously teacher professional development within our South African context. I'm present, and Caitlin and I will be presenting, and we're looking at how pre-service teachers engage in a science-focused activities in a primary school. So somebody would be saying, oh, what's so different about all of this? Well, we're going to take you on a journey, but before we get there, just to introduce, as in other countries, we have schooling sector and the higher education sector. And if we are working with pre-service teachers, the particular group that we're working with are those who will be teaching in the high school. And we call it the further education and training sector, where they will be working with children of 15 to 16, or 15, 17, 18, or even older. I mean, could be 20, 21 years old, basically. So this group of students that we're looking at are life sciences, and we could say, okay, what subject is that? It's biology. And very importantly, if it's professional development, then we are looking at their content knowledge, and we're looking at their pedagogical content knowledge, which really is looking at how to teach. More than that, it is important that they understand the curriculum for life sciences if they're going to be teaching those high school children. Now, we know that within this changing context within the world, it is important that our students are developed beyond, not just for the next 5 years, but really to the times that are so uncertain. So how do we do that? We have to think about how do we engage them? And with engagement, we look at planning and teaching. So what we decided is to consider an alternative model of teacher learning. And this alternative model obviously had to be different from what they would normally be expected to work with. And here we'd have to look at relational learning, reflective, and also that whatever their learning was concerned with, it had to be embedded in the practice and within the particular context. And more than that, we have to look at creativity, how we challenge and how people meet challenges, the self-planning, how did they decide how to plan, why do they decide to plan in that way, and then to look at content that is relative to what they are teaching in biology, life sciences, not just that what is in the textbook, but what is really happening in the environment around them, whether it's locally, globally, how do we connect all that together to what they are doing? And more than that, with this particular group, we were saying, okay, you're the high school teachers. What we are also looking at is how would you teach if you are expected to be in the primary phase? Okay, so the research question is, how do life sciences, FET, pre-service teachers engage in science-focused activities with grade R learners? Remember, they are learning how to teach 16, 17, 18 years old. Now we are saying, how will you be able to teach 5 and 6-year-old children? And from our literature, we can quite clearly see effective professional development. Really, if we want it to be effective, we need to understand what are the various teaching and learning strategies, our pedagogical strategies. We also have to consider the subject knowledge that they're going to be engaged with, and it has to be relevant to the present context. Also, very importantly, how to respond to learners' needs. We know that so many learners have diverse needs, and there are also so many that have really, if we think about it, the inclusive learning aspects that we have to be considered. So within all of this, school-based and participatory models are the most effective and the most progressive. So if we say that if that is what the literature is looking at, what theoretical framework are we working with? If we are saying the authentic context and the classroom are important, then obviously experiential learning is what we are thinking about. So what are their experiences? What are their reflections? How is it that they're going to work within a primary school, where, for example, the young children learn and they thrive on curiosity, inquiry, and hands-on exploration? So here we were really taking our high school teachers in practice, or pre-service teachers, into untethered waters, into uncertain waters. So what did we do? In this module, which is a teaching module where you learn how to teach the content of biology to grade 10, 11, and 12 learners, we sat with the students and we said, this is our initial idea about what it is that we would like to do for the assignment. So with the students, we co-created what the assignment would be. And there were 67 students in this module. And because 67 students cannot go directly to a school, we had made contact with 2 schools. And in those 2 schools, we worked with grade R in the one school and grade 4 in the other school. The students were divided into 2 groups. There were 10 groups of 2 to 3 students in each group. 10 groups were planning to teach grade R. 13 groups were expected to plan to teach grade 4. Now, in order for them to do that, they had to go through the policy document for the grade R and also for the grade 4s. So they understand the policy document for the high school. Now they're learning about the policy document for the primary school. And within all of that, it was decided that they had to do 5 activities. They had to do 2 stories. They also had to do a drama with the children based on the stories that they were going to be reading. And they had to give the learners an opportunity to share a story related to nature. And the last activity was they had to do a science investigation with the learners. So if you think about it, the books that they were going to read from, these books were sourced from a publisher, and each group of students was given at least 2 books. And those books were going to be given to the schools. The assignment, obviously that's the assignment. They all got into a bus. We drove to the school, and when we got to the school, the students went into their particular groups, and they then had to do the activities with the respective learners. And then you could say, okay, if you're doing these activities, how do you assess it? Notice we made the assessment quite inclusive. We also looked at the fact that we needed to give some basis to all of this. So as you can see, each task had 9 marks. And what were we looking at? What do the students do with the learners? How do they do it with the learners? And why did they do it in the ways that they did? And that's how they were sharing their particular reflections as well. So we did that. And then you could say, alternative model. What makes this an alternative model? Well, firstly, they had to look at the curriculum document for the foundation phase, and they had to look at what was it that was expected of them. They also had to design age-appropriate resources. Remember, children in grade R are 5 and 6 years old. They're working with 15, 16, 17, 18. I stress that point. And they also had to make the resources appropriate, the teaching and learning strategies appropriate, and the assessment. Most importantly, because there's an issue with reading within our particular country, they had to integrate literacy and numeracy into the science lessons, so you can understand the importance of reading stories. They also were expected to develop an understanding of how children learn. And lastly, to enhance the teaching of how they will teach older children. So within this whole process, the understanding of what a curriculum is and the literacy of how to understand and implement a curriculum is really, really important. And therefore, they were taken on a journey which was meaningful, structured, and educationally sound. And yeah, interpretation and implementation was what they were looking at. Caitlin, you take over. Be loud, please. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Prof. Good day, everyone. I'm now going to focus on how the pre-service teachers implemented these science-focused activities in their classrooms and what learner engagement looked like in practice. I'll be drawing on 3 examples from the different student groups to show how they approach teaching and learning in the foundation phase. So if we're looking at slide 8, on the slide, we will see how one group of pre-service teachers use storytelling as a way to teach a science concept. And they used a story from the books that was donated, and the story was called Izinambuzane, meaning insects. So it focuses on different types of insects that learners are already familiar with. So what's important here is not just the story itself, but how it was presented by our students. And the group took turns reading and showed pictures throughout. So this helped learners stay engaged and to follow along. They also asked questions before reading, and they did this by using the learner's mother tongue or home language. And this made the lesson more inclusive and accessible to everyone. The outdoor setting also contributed to a calm and focused learning environment. So in terms of purpose, the activity promoted active listening, it promoted critical thinking, as well as verbal expression. Learners were encouraged to relate the story to their own experiences, which also helped to deepen their understanding. They were also asked to choose an insect and explain why they chose this insect, which supported imagination and reasoning. And in addition to this, looking at the picture, the group included a counting activity where they used nature-based images so that learners counted items such as the fruits or the flowers or the insects. And this shows how science can be integrated with numeracy as well, making the learning experience more meaningful and connected to its surroundings. Going into the next example, slide 9, and building on this next example shows how the group extended learning through movement and hands-on activities. So again, this group used the insect story, Izinambuzane, but what stands out here is how the learners actively engaged with the content. So learners shared their own experience with insects and made connections to their everyday lives, which made the lesson more relevant. They also included movement. So where learners walked in a line pretending to be ants with the students, and they were singing Sia Sabenza, Sia Sabenza, which actually means we are working. And this is so significant because it links movement, it links language, and also science. So it helps learners understand how ants behave while they are actively participating in the lesson. So in addition to this, the group introduced a volcano eruption experiment as seen in the picture, and they used simple materials. So this allowed learners to observe the reaction and become more curious about what's happening. And some learners were already familiar with volcanoes while others were not. So to support this, students also used a video. So in this example, we see storytelling, we see movement and experimentation all working together to create an engaging and interactive learning experience for young learners. Okay, going to the final example, slide 10. This shows how another group linked the storytelling to scientific concepts, but here we're doing it in a different way. This group used the story Umsindo Wezgubu, which means the sound of the drum. And the story is about a little boy named Lebro, and he enjoys making these drumming sounds, and he uses objects all around him, if it's the pencil on the desk at school or whether it's a toothbrush at home. And this was used to introduce the concept of sound to our students, to the learners, and focusing on how sound is produced and how it is heard through the ear. So through this, learners begin to understand how sound is created, even though it was introduced in a very simple and age-appropriate way. In addition to this, the group included an outdoor insect hunt. So you can see that from the picture, where learners search for these pictures of insects that the students placed around the environment. And each learner had to find an insect and try to identify it or name it. And this task encouraged observation, participation, and also built the confidence of the grade R learners. And what also stood out here was that it, again, wasn't limited to the classroom. So learners were exploring, they were interacting and engaging with their surroundings. So overall, this example shows how the storytelling was scientific concept and real-world exploration can be combined to support meaningful learning. Now going to the last slide, which is the conclusion. So to conclude, what stands out most from these examples is that learning can be something that learners truly enjoy. It's not just tasks that they do all day. So they were not just listening, they were moving together, they were participating, they were exploring and making sense of their world, the world around them. So science was no longer something just abstract, but it was meaningful to them and it connected to their everyday experiences. And at the same time, pre-service teachers were not just teaching, they were learning. They learned how to adapt, they learned how to respond to their learners and how to create engaging and inclusive learning environments. So these experiences show that learning does not happen through just memorizing content, but through interaction, through exploration, and through participation. And mostly they show that when teachers are given the opportunity to teach in real context, they begin to grow in confidence and they explore their own creativity and purpose. So these experiences show us that teaching is not just about delivering content, but about creating opportunities for our learners to engage, for them to explore and to make meaning for themselves as well. So ultimately, this reminds us that effective science teaching starts with meaningful engagement for both the learner and for teachers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Caitlin, that was so well done. Oh, yay!
Thank you, Prof.
That was so well done. Okay, must we go off now?
Siyabonga kakhulu.
Must we go off?
Yes, of course.
Oh.
One time, right? Come here to Utena.
Okay, we will. Bye-bye. Bye.